I'm very happy to introduce Shalom World, a new Catholic, family-oriented Catholic TV that will be 24/7 English-speaking television channel. I hope that through this media we will be able to continue to spread the good news of the gospel of Jesus Christ to the world, a world that needs Shalom, that needs the peace that comes from the King of Peace, Jesus Christ. I congratulate all those who participate in supporting this new media, and that it may continue to reach millions and millions of people all over the world where we need the light of Christ.
Shalom World, God's own channel.
And Jesus said, I have come that you may have life and have it to the full. John chapter 10, verse 10. As a Catholic priest, I don't know a lot of scriptures by heart, but I do know that one. And there's a reason, and I'd like to tell you that story. I'm a Jesuit. I work in the Bellarmine Retreat House on the northwest side of Chicago. And I grew up in Chicago to a Catholic family. I'm one of 5 kids. We were a pious Catholic family. We prayed the rosary together. I went to Catholic schools, grade schools, and I entered the Jesuits right out of high school. I had a strong sense, even as a young man, that the Lord was calling me to be a priest. But there was a problem. I was afraid of the dark. It started when I was just a young kid. I used to have these terrible nightmares, and I would wake up in the middle of the night screaming. I mean, they were really scary nightmares. I can still remember them to this day. Me going down in some dungeon being pursued by ghosts and demons that were trying to get me. And I would wake up screaming, and then my parents would come in and they would calm me down. Well, as I grew up, I was able to control some of those fears, and I wasn't waking up in the middle of the night screaming, and I didn't have to have my parents come in, but I did need to sleep with the lights on. And that was rather embarrassing as a young man, but I was just terrified of the dark. I couldn't be alone in the dark. So when I entered the Jesuits at age 18, I was part of the novitiate, and we slept in this large dormitory, and the lights were out at night. And so when I would just dread that every evening when the lights go out and I'd be shivering in my bed. Well, as a Jesuit, the hallmark of our spirituality are the spiritual exercises of St. Ignatius Loyola. Here's the idea. St. Ignatius said that just as we need physical exercise to stay in shape, so we need spiritual exercises to get our hearts in shape. The full spiritual exercises are a 30-day retreat, an intense experience of silence, absolute silence for 30 days, and we're meditating maybe 5 or 6 hours a day, in addition to Mass and the Rosary and other kinds of prayer. Well, as a young man, a Jesuit novice, I'm making the spiritual exercises, and we reach the point where we're praying about Jesus saying, I am the good shepherd, and I have come that you may have life and have it to the full. And I was meditating on that text and praying about that text. Remember, we're silent for 30 days and we're praying 5 to 6 hours a day. And that text is just rumbling around in my head. Jesus saying, I have come that you may have life and have it to the full. Now, let me just pause at this point. And I just shared with you a fear that I really struggled with as a young man. And I wonder, what are some of the fears in your own life that you struggle with? At different stages of our lives, we have small fears, we have medium fears, we have huge fears that paralyze us. And as we go through different stages in life, different things frighten us. And I believe that the Lord wants to heal us of those fears. The process of growing in faith is believing John 10:10. Jesus saying, I have come that you may have life and have it to the full. Now, I had heard that text many times before, and it was easy to think of the pastor at my church because he was a holy man, or some of the nuns that I had experienced in grade school, or even my parents. But I had never really thought about that text applying to me, that Jesus had come that I may have life and have it to the full. And the way that my life was compromised as a young man was through this tremendous fear that was very embarrassing. So there was one night in the middle of the retreat, right after I had been praying over that text, I have come that you may have life and have it to the full, where we retired for the evening, and it was a dark and stormy night. You know, it was like out of a Cecil B. DeMille movie. The thunder was rolling and the lightning was flashing. And here we are in this big old novitiate building, which was huge. And it had been built back in the 1920s. It had huge echoing corridors. And so when that thunder rolled and the lightning flashed, it reverberated, it bounced off the walls of the building. So there I am. And this is the absolute scariest night. And I'm shivering there in my bed while this rainstorm is coming down. And I hear this word echoing in my heart. I have come that you may have life and have it to the full. Well, somehow I managed to fall asleep, but about 2 o'clock in the morning, there was this huge thunderclap, and I woke up, and I thought everybody would wake up, but I was the only one that was awakened by it. And a thought came into my head. Go down to the Jesuit graveyard to pray. I looked at the alarm clock next to my bed. It was 2:30 in the morning, and I said, Lord, this can't be from you. This must be just some really bad dream. And I tried to go back to sleep, but the thought kept coming back. I want you to go out in the middle of the night into the Jesuit graveyard and pray. So I said, all right, Lord, I'm going to trust that this is from you. And I'm praying as hard and as intensely as I have ever prayed in my entire life. I have come that you may have life and have it to the full. So I walked down the Jesuit corridors, and the lightning is flashing, and I went outside, and there was a small graveyard next to the novitiate building where the Jesuits had been buried since that novitiate building was built in the 1920s. There were, at that point, maybe 60 graves there. And I made my way out of the building, up the hill, to that past the tombstones, and my knees are shaking. And I should mention at that point that my second greatest fear was cemeteries. I hated to go in cemeteries because I was just terribly afraid of ghosts and whatever would come out in the middle of the night. So my two greatest fears, the dark and cemeteries, the Lord, I believed, was inviting me to confront at that moment. So I made my way past the gravestones, and there at the top of the hill, there was a tableau, and on that tableau was a crucifix. And on either side of that crucifix was the Apostle John, the beloved disciple, and Jesus' mother, Mary. And they were praying next to Jesus on the cross. And in the middle of the rainstorm, and the rain is pelting down on my face, and I'm absolutely drenched at that point, I keep praying, Lord, I believe and trust your word that you have come that I may be healed of my fear, because this fear is holding me back from the fullness of life. I want to trust, Lord, that you are greater than my fears, that you're stronger than the night, that you have come into this world as light for the world, and that light will bring me life. And so I knelt down, I closed my eyes, and I prayed over and over and over again, Jesus, come into my heart. Jesus, heal me of this fear. I want to believe that you have come that I may have life and have it to the full. And I can't say that it was instantaneous, But in the course of that prayer, and I really have no idea how long I was kneeling there in the night in the middle of the rain, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, an hour, I have no idea of how much time had passed. But gradually, my beating heart started to slow down. My rapid respiration started to slow. And I actually started to smile. And I started to laugh. And I started to sing. And I raised my eyes and I lifted and I looked up to the heavens, and the thunder was still rolling and the lightning was still flashing. But I was laughing because I knew at that moment the Lord had healed me. Healed me not only of my fear of the dark, but healed me of my fear of death. Healed me of my fear of being in this gravestone surrounded by all these Jesuit brothers. In fact, so profound was the healing that night that I actually have a difficult time sleeping with the lights on now. I like it to be pitch black. And one of my favorite places to pray now are in cemeteries, praying for especially loved ones who have gone before me, and relishing all of those memories, thinking of the Holy Communion, this communion of saints that they now experience, that one day I will be called to experience. After I finished my prayer, and there was just a sense that it had come to completion, I turned around, I marked myself with the sign of the cross, and I made my way back down the hill into the novitiate building, sobbing. And as I walked down the corridor, I'm leaving up a puddle of water behind me, and I managed to take off my wet clothes and hang them up, and then slip back into bed. And all of my fellow Jesuit novices were still sound asleep. And it was about 4 o'clock in the morning, and I went back to sleep and slept soundly until the bell woke us up the next morning. John 10:10. I have come that you may have life and have it to the full. I invite you to bring your fears to the Lord, to bring your hopes, to bring your dreams. Jesus doesn't love us generically. It's not, I love you folks, like some cheesy entertainer at the end of you're a great audience, I love you, you're wonderful. That isn't Jesus. He knows us intimately. He knows us personally. And he wants to reach into each one of our hearts and give us what we need to grow in our relationship with him. Let me close with just one other story. I celebrated a funeral not so long ago of a man who was perhaps an atheist, perhaps an agnostic. He was somewhere in between. And even though he had been raised Catholic, there had been a series of heartaches and disappointments where he just gave up on God. He felt that God isn't interested in me. How could a good God ever allow such suffering to come into my life? His family came to me and they said, Father Michael, would you do the funeral? Because he liked you. He didn't like many priests and he wasn't a churchgoer, but he liked you and he trusted you. And so if there's anyone that could celebrate his funeral, we would ask that it would be you. Well, how do you say no to a request like that? So I was honored to celebrate the man's funeral. And afterwards, his wife came up to me and said, Father Michael, I have to tell you a story. My husband died 2 days ago, but he came to me in a dream last night, the night before the funeral. And he said, honey, you don't have to worry about me because I've met a friend, and that friend is going to take care of me. I just smiled because we both knew who that friend was. Jesus loves us past our fears. Even when we push him away, even we say, I don't believe in you, or I don't even know if you're there. We may give up on God, but God never gives up on us. That story that I just told you happened many, many years ago. But it's one of the great religious experiences of my life. And I reflect on it often. I like to call those kinds of experiences stepping stones, because as I look back in my life, I see that the Lord has been guiding me step by step. And there are these special experiences where the Lord's grace just breaks in an extraordinary way. And it's those kinds of opportunities when we remember them, when we reflect on them, and we call them to mind, they strengthen us for the future. So I can't say that I live without fear. All of us have fears. Recall that even in the Garden of Gethsemane on the night before he died, Jesus' sweat became like drops of blood. So frightened was he by the prospect of what he was going to endure the next day. So it's unrealistic that we would live without fear. But when we recall how the Lord has come into our life and strengthened us at different stages, it gives us courage to be able to face those fears and not to be paralyzed, and to continue to grow and to be able to encourage others. That's the Lord's gift for each one of us. What is it that holds us back from a deeper experience of faith, from a deeper joy, from really living our faith in a way that, as Pope Francis says, is a joyful Christian that becomes someone that says, I want to be like him, I want to be like her, because they have joy, they have life in their life. I want that joy, I want that life. That's what the Lord wants to bring, I believe, into each one of our lives. But we need to ask for it. Ask for the gift of a joyful heart. Ask that we can grow past our fears. Whatever it is that paralyzes us, whether it's a small fear, a medium fear, a big fear, whether that fear has been with us for a long time or whether it's a recent fear that's come into our life, ask the Lord in faith and confidence. Because if I believe anything about the Lord, I believe this. Jesus said, I have come that you may have life and have it to the full. And so now, when I go to sleep at night and I turn off those lights, I like the dark, and I like to pray in the dark because I can especially feel the Lord's presence there. And when I go away on retreats, I like to search around in the area to see if there's a graveyard, because I like to remember that I'm a pilgrim on this earth. I'm not going to be here forever. But however long the Lord allows me to stay, I'm going to be walking with the Lord, and I'm journeying toward him. Whether we live a long life, whether we live a short life, whether we live in riches, whether we live in poverty, whether we live in health, or whether we experience a lot of sickness, the Lord is working in the depths of our hearts, drawing us to a fuller communion, a deeper faith. I've shared with you my story, and I call that a stepping stone. I invite you now to reflect on your own life experiences. What are the seminal experiences that you've had, those basic life experiences where you say, I know the Lord is real. He touched me at that moment. Remember those, relish them, and celebrate them. Amen. Amen.
Did you like the program you just watched? Help Shalom World bring more programs like this to a global audience. Your support helps us share the peace of Christ with the world. Visit shalomworld.org/donate